Thank you, and welcome to day 2 of our annual meeting. I hope you had fun last night at our trivia and happy hour, reconnecting with friends over dinner, and centered yourself for your day with yoga this morning. With how we're going to spend our day today, we have the opportunity to learn new ways to be able to build our networks, including this alumni network. We will be led through this workshop with Victoria Zhang here, who will introduce herself in just a bit. So through that workshop, we'll begin by learning about the science and practice of creating our networks and social connection. Then we will spend most of our time today in small group activities, so that's why you're at these color-coded tables, and I know there's a little bit of color confusion, so we can sort that out as needed a little bit later this morning, so don't worry about that for the moment right now. And then we will spend some time thinking about how we take what we are learning from these exercises and applying it to our expectations and desires and direction for the alumni network. But with that, I'm going to hand it off to Anne to do her morning comments.
And Barbara Anderman's in the room as well. Well, I just love hearing the energy. I think the decibel levels in the city of Chicago have risen because you are all here, and it just gives me great joy. I'm really excited about this conversation about networks because networks are intentional. People spend a lot of time building them but not using them. So I want you to think today about how not only these sisters who are your rock and your support, but they're also your allies in terms of the things that you want to do. And they may be professional, they may be personal, they may just be, you want to go on a vacation, fine, but leverage. Think about how we build this together, but how we use it and how we use each other and lift each other sort of in what we do. So that's my little bit of advice. And I also wanted to introduce you to Carol Emmett's summer intern, who's here for next summer. And it's Arya Prashad, who's Ratna's daughter. Arya wrote me one of the most amazing cover letters and resumes, and who, if you receive this from a high school, third-year high school student, it's just overwhelming. And her passion and interest is very convincing about wanting to really support all of you is part of the Carol Emmett Foundation and the Carol Emmett Alumni Network. So that's great. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Morgan and Sarah up to talk and tell us a story.
Good morning, everyone. Is this working? Yes? Okay. My name's Sarah McKay. I am part of CEF4, and Morgan Jones, part of CEF4. And we were asked to share a little bit about a story related to CEF4 and the connections that we've made through CEF4. And I was doing some Facebook scrolling and came across this meme that said, if you hang out with successful people, they will brainwash you into believing in yourself and thinking you can achieve anything. And I immediately texted that off to our text chain and said, thank you for brainwashing me. Because that's what this group has done. It's been so transformational for me. People ask me, what has the fellowship done for you? And I've shared that it's the most transformational experience in my professional career. And people ask me why. And it's hard to put that into words. When I was walking down the streets of Chicago last night with our class, I was talking to someone who shared with me that her and her husband knew that their family wasn't complete until they had had their 4th child. That's how I feel about this fellowship. My professional life wasn't complete until I met these amazing women that have become a part of my life. And there's something so magical about what Doug does during those convergence sessions that has brought us together. It's been really just an incredible experience for me. But people say, well, what do you mean? What has that done for you? I hold my head a little higher every day. I feel a little stronger. I'm a lot healthier. I started my Peloton journey in this amazing hotel. I lost 25 pounds and ran a Ragnar relay race last fall. More than 20 miles in 35 hours with 12 women I'd never met. I don't think I ever would have done that without this fellowship. I sat up in that room upstairs and I was terrified to come down. We have a transplant surgeon in our program. We have a woman who I am convinced is going to cure diabetes. What was I doing here? We have laughed together. We've cried together. We've smiled together. I've never been around people who want me to succeed more than this amazing group. And I'll tell you, at work, my life is different. I speak louder. I have more to say. I always sit at the table. I didn't do that before. And I think my influence and impact is changing because of this experience. And the connections that we have made are lifetime connections. And I'm so excited to be part of this alumni network and branch out outside of our class and have those moments with all of you. So I just wanted to take a moment to say how grateful I am. And I'm particularly grateful for this amazing woman who has really been just a rock for me. Love her, and I'm excited to hear her story today too. Mwah.
No pressure, right? Whoa. Morgan Jones, CEF4. So similar to Sarah, I will say I started this journey as an individual. I came into a room, I felt like an imposter. I didn't know how I got here, didn't know how I belonged, and I didn't know what my journey ahead was going to look like or what it was going to entail. I worked as hard as I could the entire time to get to where I was. And yet, I looked around me and I didn't see a team. I didn't see a network. I didn't see people that felt like they had me no matter what. I didn't see a place where I had sponsorship or advocacy, where it was okay to take risk, where it was okay to fail. And more importantly, where it was okay to be vulnerable and share with others my failings and what I was gonna do differently. Over the past 2 years, it has been the hardest time of my entire life. So not only have I grown professionally, as Sarah indicated, but I think you know I also lost my husband. Lost my husband last June. And 2 o'clock in the morning, when I sent a text to my network of CEF4, I had 5 people respond immediately at 2 o'clock in the morning. They were there for me. And on my darkest day and on my darkest year, I had this amazing network of people. They were there to pull me up, to challenge me, and to hold me when I couldn't hold myself. I leave this program as never leaving, but as continuing to grow my network and continuing to pull others along. So I believe if we all truly challenge ourselves, ensure we're authentic, have high integrity, and are vulnerable, we are sponsors for other women, for all types of people. We put down our ladders and we help them grow. We help them come up with us. That to me is what CEF4 has given me, and it's really thanks to all of Carol Emmett. I think it's so important that, again, we are all leaving here today. Somebody double check me. I think it's with 92 sisters in the Alumnae network, right? So I think I have, minus me, I think I have 92 sisters. I think. And I look forward to continuing to see that grow. I believe we are capable of changing the world. Some people may say that's naive, but you know what? I don't think so, because I've seen what's happened and what's been possible in the past year. And it is exceptional and it is powerful. And it is because of this program that I now believe in myself. Where I started, where a place, as Stephen Covey talks about, we judge others by actions and judge ourselves by our intent. I am no longer that person. I now give people grace. I open my doors, and again, I help them to be a place where they can fail and they can learn. So thank you all for helping on the journey. Thank you all for being part of it. Thank you all for sharing your stories with others such that we can normalize the vulnerability and the struggles that we all have and the importance of it. And I just want to say cheers to all the queens of badassery and let our numbers continue to grow. Thank you.
Hello? Hi, good morning. So thank you so much, Sarah and Morgan, for sharing these really beautiful, heartfelt stories of the connections that you've made here at the Carol Emmett Foundation. These stories really is a perfect segue into the theme of today's workshop, the science and practice of creating social connections. My name is Victoria Zhang, and I'm an assistant professor at UW-Madison in the management department. In my work, I spend a lot of time thinking about social networks. I think about how social networks form, how they dissolve, and why that's important for our happiness, for our health, for our professional careers and goals. And you are an extraordinary group of individuals, and it's my absolute honor and pleasure to be here with you today. No worries. I want to start off by saying that science has shown us that social relationships are the single most important predictor of our well-being. And you, in all of your leadership positions, have also probably recognized the importance of social networks in our professional careers. So it's not just about our health and happiness, it's also about how we do at work. Social networks predict how well we cognitively function at work, how engaged we are at work, how innovative and creative we are at work. So before I delve into this workshop a little bit deeper, I want to give you a sense of the agenda that we will be tackling today. So my goal is to be your guide in this process in which we explore together these questions. Why networks? So Sarah and Morgan and Anne have set us up for thinking about why networks are important, and particularly what is so unique about the connections formed here in the CEF. I will also be talking to you a little bit about, what do we know about the network signatures that set successful women leaders apart? And finally, we will be drawing on science, on research, and actually intervene in the group that you are sitting in today to apply these principles to see how can we create deeper social connections within your group in just a little under 2 hours. And finally, I will be turning this to Meredith to think about what practices can we adopt to generalize this to other settings, or how can we create this at scale? What are some of the practices we can solidify going forward to make sure that we can sustain and maintain these connections? So despite the importance of social networks, most networks actually happen as accidents. So I really like what Anne said in the beginning, that networks are intentional. That when we are actually intentional and conscious about building our social networks, we can build better and stronger networks. So most people, or many people, actually, despite the importance of social networks, may not spend enough time consciously thinking about and developing their professional networks and their personal networks. When scientists have looked at millions and millions of communication patterns, they have found that there is one unique network signature that sets women leaders up for success. So for very successful women leaders, scientists have found that 77% of high-placing women have an inner circle of strong ties to 2 or 3 other women who communicate intensely with one another. What does that mean in network terms? So if you think about our connections as these edges and the context that we have as these circles and nodes, that's how I see the world every day in my mind, is in terms of these circles and edges. Then for highly successful women leaders who are at the center of this network, they not only have many, many ties to others, but these ties to other women are also very dense, in the sense that the women contacts are also contacts with one another. And that's something that we have here at the Carol Emmett Foundation. And this is really quite striking. This result is quite striking because if we look at women who have very similar leadership qualifications, what sets these high-placing versus lower-placing women apart is really this inner core network of having strong ties to other women. And this is not true for men. So for men, it's the single most important predictor of their leadership success is how central they are in their social network. So having these in mind, how do we reproduce these social networks? One common practice is you put people together and you can attend social mixers. But science have actually told us that going to social mixers don't necessarily lead to stronger social integration. This is particularly true if the person is a demographic minority. So if I walk into any social interaction or social setting, I would see that people would group themselves into these pockets, based on the status in the organization, their gender, their racial, demographic composition. So it sometimes don't necessarily lead to closer relationships and more deeper relationships. What is essential is having safety and structure around creating these social connections. And that's what we are going to do here in today's workshop, is I'm going to provide a safe space. Actually, this is provided by the Carol Emmett Foundation. And we will have a little bit of structure in creating social connections. So I would like to start off by asking you to take a few minutes to get to know someone from the group you're sitting in today who you don't know really well. I think the following exercises that we're going to do is best to work in groups of 5 to 7 people. So if we have some groups who have fewer than 2 people, maybe we can think about reshuffling the groups a little bit. You already shuffled. So just make sure that there is somebody or there are some people at your table who you don't know very well. All right, we will have an opportunity to further understand your conversation partner in the following exercises, but let's regroup for now. What did you ask? What did you talk about? Yeah, just getting to know each other. My guesses are that here are some of the questions you asked one another in the 5 minutes that had just passed. What do you do? Where do you live? Maybe where were you born? Where did you go to school? Right? Am I right? Okay, so these are safe questions. They provoke safe answers. And these are questions we would typically ask with a stranger that we just met or with somebody that we don't know very well. But in order to really cultivate a social bond and build a deeper relationship, we just have to move beyond the safe questions. The reason that is so important is because deeper social relationships really requires the element of having trust. Not just any type of trust, but affective trust. And affective trust is required and maintained and cultivated through having a little bit of a risky question, through showing some vulnerability, as Sarah and Morgan said in the beginning of this workshop. So affective trust is a form of reciprocated interpersonal care and concern or emotional bonds that you show towards one another. This is distinctly different from cognitive trust, which is I trust you because I know you're a competent and capable person who is good at getting a job done. And affective trust is not only important for dyadic interactions. When scientists study teams, people working in teams, they find that for high-functioning teams, having this emotional and affective element really genuinely showing that you're concerned and care for each other's well-being is critical for high-functioning teams. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is to push a little further and to ask you to move from safer questions to a little bit of a risky questions. So let's think back on the conversation we just had. What are some questions you could have asked that would help you, or you could have done that could help you to understand your conversation partner a little bit better? Any ideas? Yes?
So I have a lot of feelings on this conversation about effective trust, because what's the right time to dig in? Because, so I did dig in, so, which I tend to do, which is sometimes favorably received, and sometimes it's like, man, this girl is nosy. Right? Because there's the work is safe, but then you say, oh, you're married, oh, how long have you been married? And oh, it's the second marriage, oh, your son, oh, how did you get that name? And so I tend to have these conversations because that's just who I am, but they can be perceived as nosy or a little bit too deep. So what is the right time? 5 minutes seems like a lot to get into. Oh,
definitely. That's an excellent
I'll
question.
get there. I'll get there, but it's like, it might not be in 5 minutes, but it might be like 45.
Yeah, that's an excellent
Mostly because
question.
I get bored about the work stuff. I'm just being honest. Like I really get bored about now what do you do? Now what is that again? Like, oh, okay.
Well, and I would say that when I was listening to her tell her story, I was very interested in how what she was telling me was how it makes her feel. So, that was part of my question. Remember I said, gosh, how do you feel about that? And so I think, thinking about going beyond just the facts and how do the facts about your story in turn make you feel. So
that's excellent. And I loved your question and thought about, when is it safe to understand and to begin asking these questions. And that's something that I also hope that we can reflect as a group. Obviously here at the Carol Emmett Foundation, you guys have created an environment that is a safe space today for you to share your innermost fears or dreams or hopes. So that's an excellent question, and I will turn this to the audience. When do you feel safe to ask these more risky questions? And how do we create a safer environment going forward?
I think if you're willing to share something a little bit more personal and somebody's more willing to answer a question or discuss their vulnerability. So, and not in a strategic way, just if you're willing to share something that's not. It was interesting because we were sitting here before we started this exercise, and I started talking about this new job I got, and then I mentioned my husband died, and I tend to. And Morgan knows this, I tend to, that frames a lot of things. So I say that, and then I realized, oh, I just said a whole bunch of personal stuff. But then when you sit with someone and you've been very personal, then they're more inclined to be very personal back.
Yeah. You perfectly anticipated what is going to happen in a few slides down the road, which is like this idea of reciprocation. Like it needs to be balanced. You share something, I share a little something back. So I'm not telling you, like the moral of the story is not telling you, tomorrow you go to work and you tell everybody everything about yourself. That is called oversharing. Excellent. So I love the discussions we're having. So let's actually, in order to create affective trust, let me introduce the Johari window model to you. So this is a model that's developed by social psychologists in the 1950s. It is incredibly influential and powerful. So if we think about our relationship of the self to others, we can think about that in terms of 4 different quadrants. So the first quadrant is what is known to yourself and that is also known to others. So this is the public space. This is information you can likely find by stalking somebody on LinkedIn, by Googling them, or by reading their resume. This is something we're typically comfortable with sharing with a stranger who we've just met. We can also think about our relation of the self to others in terms of this hidden space. So this is knowledge that is known to yourself but unknown to others. This could be our hopes, our dreams, the flashbulb experiences that made who we are today. But it's not necessarily something that you would feel comfortable and safe sharing with a stranger right off the bat. Now there's also this blind spot, which is things that are unknown to yourself but is known to others. So in the 30 minutes that we have spent together in this room, you have most certainly formed an impression about me. And that might be shared by many of you, and I have absolutely no idea what your impression is of me. And that is my blind spot. And this is true for every social interaction. Whenever we have an interaction, we form an impression of somebody else, and that person might not necessarily know what that is. And the last quadrant is the unknown quadrant. This is our subconsciousness. I'm not a psychiatrist, and so we won't be spending time going to this quadrant today. But we will be spending time in expanding the public space to the hidden space, and this horizontally to the blind spots. This is important because expanding the public space will really help us build deeper relationships. Okay, so what we're going to do is expanding the public space through self-disclosure by moving public to hidden. Do you have any questions so far? All right, so I'd like you to turn back to your conversation partner who you've just spoken to and think about, what could you have said or done to really get to know your partner? And we can try again, and we can regroup at 10 a.m.
All right, so let's wrap up our conversation, and I promise you we will have a series of exercises coming up for you to talk and know one another more.
I want to be part of it, so I was very interested.
All right. I promise you we will have plenty of opportunities to talk further. So what we just did, thank you. I try with my pen, but it doesn't create the same sounds. All right, so what we just did now was one of the most powerful ways of creating social connections is through self-disclosure. To really have a deeper relationship and get closer to someone, we need to look beyond the resume stuff, the LinkedIn stuff. We need to know what motivates that person, what makes them anxious, what makes them happy, what do they fear, and do they hate feeling anxious or feeling that way? So self-disclosure has been shown to be one of the most powerful ways of creating social connections. It is universally associated with liking and closeness. So this has been shown in hundreds and hundreds of meta-analyses through different settings and different scenarios. In particular, it is more important, whether you're interacting with somebody who looks similar to you or who doesn't look similar to you. In particular, what's most important is that revealing deeper truth about yourself has a greater effect than simply disclosing a larger amount or volume of information. And to what's your name? Monica anticipated before, reciprocity is key in this process. So it's not about oversharing, bringing your whole self to work. It really needs to be balanced in this relationship. I share something, you share something. It has to be reciprocated. So for what we're going to be doing now, I promise you we'll have more talking points, is to introduce your partner to the rest of your group. And remember, everybody should take a turn. So I want to make sure that we are on time. So we will have until 10:20 to do this, but I will please ask you to keep time, to make sure that everybody takes a turn. Because if we don't, then it really creates this feeling of exclusion and isolation rather than social integration. So, I would encourage you also in your conversations to, minimize the resume stuff and go deeper into the vital stuff. What is key to that person? So introduce everybody to your group. This will set us up for future exercises in just a minute. We'll have until 10:20 a.m. Hey.
She relies on her neighborhood and her friends in that way. So that's cool.
All right, you'll have more opportunities to talk, I promise. So what we just did through these conversations and exercises is expanding the public space and into the hidden space through self-disclosure. In the next exercise, which I call the lifeline exercise, we are going to be doing this. So if you think about the timeline from when you were born to the present day, which when you were at your birth, you probably don't remember, when we're trying to give a story of our lives, we typically tell a story like this that's chronological. I was born in Beijing, I went to Cornell, like on my own to the US for my undergraduate education, I went to Yale, I found my passion in studying social networks, and I got my PhD from Yale, I moved to UW-Madison, and today I am here today. So that's a linear story of how we tend to tell our lives. But in reality, your lifeline might look more like this. There are ups and downs, there are setbacks, and there are moments of achievements. It might also look like this. When you are encountering the same challenges over and over and over again, it feels like you're even moving back in time. So that's why there are curved. The lines here are curved. Or it could be that you're still trying to get back to how good it was in 7th grade. So for the next exercise, I will ask you to please pick a moment, a defining moment in your life to share with your group. Chances are you have already shared some of your life stories in the conversations you've already had. So if that's the case, I encourage you to dig a little bit deeper, share another story. If you previously shared a high point, you could consider sharing a low point. So the goal of this exercise is really continuing to help us expand the public space in a structured process. So for this exercise, I will ask you to please think about a moment from your own lifeline that helps to define who you are today and what you can bring to this group. Does anybody have any questions so far? All right, be prepared to share this with your group. So think about this for a moment. When you're ready to share this with a group, and we will regroup at 10:45. So, all right, so thank you. Thank you to whoever is helping me always. So thank you all for expanding the public space through self-disclosure. So far we have ventured from the known area to this hidden area. What we are going to be doing next is venturing into the blind spots. So moving. I promised you in the beginning that you could have more opportunities to talk. But I'm going to be talking a little bit for the next 5 minutes to give you a little bit of rest. So what we will be doing is moving through feedback, moving from the public space to your blind spots. And we're going to be doing that through a first impression exercise. And before we delve into the exercise, let me talk for a few minutes to give you some break about what does science say, or what do we know from science about the properties of first impressions. So here are some things that we know about first impressions. First of all, their validity is highly mixed. So what I mean by that is that in some circumstances, they can be highly accurate. They can be eerily accurate. So for instance, if you just show somebody what is called a thin slice, which is a 30-second video of somebody teaching with no audible content. You just see the person, but you can't hear anything. If you show somebody that video of somebody teaching at the beginning of the semester, that is actually highly predictive of their course evaluations at the end of the semester. And that is something that strikes fear in my profession. This is also true for negotiations. If you just look at, for outsiders, just observe the first few minutes of a negotiation, that has very high prediction power in the outcomes of the eventual negotiation. So sometimes first impressions are highly accurate. But in other times, they can also be way off. So for instance, if you know a group of people, you put them together in a group, you know their GRE scores, and you ask them to discuss a bunch of GRE questions together. And you ask an outside observer to look at how they discuss these GRE questions. It turns out that if you ask the outside observer to rate who is the most knowledgeable on the GRE, they usually can't do it. What people typically pick is the person who is talking the most or the person who is the most extroverted. But there is absolutely no correlation between extroversion and GRE score, or extroversion and competence. And maybe neither of those have any correlation with the GRE. So sometimes first impressions can be highly accurate, but other times they can be way off. We have very mixed evidence on this. But we do know that they are highly, highly resistant to change. And this is partly what is known as the primacy effect. Once we form an impression of someone, we will be looking for evidence to confirm these impressions. And it's incredibly hard to update our beliefs. So for instance, if somebody, when you first meet someone and that person makes a joke, that person may have become the funny one. And the next time when you are trying to look for a joke, everybody looks at that person. And that really reinforces the belief that that person is funny. This is true for every social interaction, that the first impressions we formed is incredibly resistant to change. And that's why when you're interviewing someone, it's critical to actually get the most important questions out first to avoid biasing our first impressions too much. The other thing about why first impressions are so important is because they can really influence the behaviors of the perceivers. For instance, if I tell you that somebody is very warm, even before you met them, you will think of them as very warm, and this can actually change your behavior or your attitude going forward of how you're going to interact with that person, even when you haven't met that person. So this has incredible power in shaping our behaviors going forward. The other piece of evidence is that first impressions tend to be widely shared by people within the same culture. And there is also, like across different cultures or across any type of societies, there is very strong norms against sharing these first impressions. Right? It's typically thought of as impolite and delicate to just tell someone how they seemed or how, what type of person you think they are upon first meeting them. But what we're going to be doing today is actually breaking these norms and sharing our first impressions of one another in your group. So have no fear, we're not gonna go crazy here. We're not gonna go crazy here. I can see there's a lot of resistance, and this is true across cultures. And we have a safe space here, and I'm going to put a little bit of structure in this process to facilitate. So what we are going to do specifically is that the groups will take turns providing impressions for one member who is the focal member. And everybody will get a turn, even if you don't want one. What you'll be doing is taking notes to give to that focal person. Everyone takes a turn being the focal person, and at the end, you can reflect as a group about these impressions. And I know that this is threatening, so let me provide a little bit structure around this. I will illustrate some questions that we can follow together. So for instance, what would the focal person be doing on a typical Saturday afternoon? What is the perfect vacation? And to minimize resistance to this, you can do a practice round on me. I have stood here and talked to you for maybe 20 minutes so far, and you have most certainly formed a first impression of me, and I'm really curious to hear about that. And so what would I be doing on a typical Saturday afternoon?
People watching.
People watching. People watching, because I study networks. I love to do that. Reading. It used to be that way. Taking a run, going for a run. I wish it's just too cold in Madison.
Writing a manuscript. Yeah.
Reading a manuscript. That is writing or reading. Yes, that's what I have spent the majority or all the time in my PhD doing on a Saturday, is working. But recently, I bought my first house, and because I moved from a one-bedroom apartment to a house, now I have more furniture to fill up. So I have been spending my Saturday afternoons trying to furnish my first house, and it's been a very exciting process. What is the perfect vacation for me?
Visiting a city.
Visiting a city.
Doing architectural walks.
Doing architectural walks. I like that. I wish I am that artsy.
I picture you at a lake.
A little lake. Walking close to a little lake. Okay. Yeah, Madison has a lot of beautiful lakes. That is true.
Like a food tour.
Oh my gosh, yes. You are spot on. I remember a place by the food that I've tasted there. That is how I plan out my perfect vacation. So last vacation I was on was going to Waikiki, Honolulu, and instead of planning out beaches, surfing activities, I planned out, where to eat. Day one, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yeah, so this is, you could see that through these questions, this is a structured way for me to understand a little bit about how you think of me. And this is in a way that happens, the way that in which this happens is barely threatening. And at the same time, I can also tell you or correct some of the impressions that may have been misinformed to get us closer to one another. So I hope that this practice round on me will help lower the resistance that you have. And I hope that having me lecture for the last 5 minutes have given you some break so that you can feel re-energized to delve into the blind spot through feedback.
Question?
Yes?
Do you want the full person to give feedback right away, or just wait?
I think it would be best for everybody to take notes first and then give it to the focal person. Because what happens in groups is that there's like a conformity process going on. I see this in my classrooms with undergrads too. first person says something, the second person will be like, yeah, I think that's the same thing, and then you will tend to conform. So let's do this, and let's have until 11:18 to do this. So please keep time. Let's regroup at 11:18. Okay, my phone has run. It's 11:20. Thank you. I hope everybody has had their turn. And if not, you can always go back at the end or in the subsequent activities to share these first impressions. So far I have Zhang. Thank you. All right, I love the energy in this room. I heard so much laughter. So far we have drawn on the theory and science of this framework, and we have expanded our public space in service of bringing us closer and developing affective trust in our social relationships. We have done a series of exercises going this way through self-disclosure and expanding this way through feedback. So to wrap up today's workshop, I hope that we have together explored several ways and understood the practices of developing and building a better network. I hope that we have, in just less than a little of 2 hours, this time that we have created deep connections through self-disclosure that is reciprocated and that occurs in a safe space. So to end this workshop, I will be turning this to Meredith and asking you to also reflect as a group, both within the CEF network and outside of the CEF network, thinking about as leaders, how can we create these safe spaces to continue these conversations, and how can we create this at scale? I have just this one last slide. So I started off this workshop by telling you that for most people, networks occur as accidents. And beautifully share this powerful insights that networks are intentional. And I want to distill in you and hopefully convince you a little bit that when we are more conscious about connecting, we can build better networks. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here with you today, and I hope that we can stay connected.
Thank you so much, Victoria, and I hope everybody enjoyed being able to put that to practice at our tables. So as I opened this morning, now we're going to take all of that energy and what we learned about building our networks and think about what that means for our own alumni network and really bringing that back home to why we are all together as a group. So as Callie is getting the slides up, we will be shifting into discussion at our tables, and again, as it was mentioned before, at any point you need to take breaks, please feel free to do so. You are autonomous to be able to decide when you want to be able to take a break, but we'll have some kind of 3 questions to walk through to think, what are we carrying forward? What are those concrete values and practices from the workshop that we can apply and carry forward to our network? What do you expect or desire from the alumni network? We really want to be able to hear from you as we are all part of it. It has to image all of us. We want to make sure that anything we are producing is something that you want to be a part of. And really, what is that unique value of the network compared to others? We know there are a lot of networks out there. There are a lot of different ways in which people connect, and we're probably a member of many of them. And so what is that special sauce about the CEF Alumni Network? What is going to make it individual and unique compared to the others that you are a part of? And so at each of your tables, there is an Alumni Network Governing Council member. They will help to be able to drive forward the conversation, but also to be able to document it. We want to make sure we're hearing this feedback. We're taking these concrete pieces to drive forward our work. We'll be coming together as a governing council and bringing all of the ideas and feedback in a strategic retreat in the spring. And that will really drive forward the future direction of what this network looks like. So really want to be able to hear from you today and in the future, but know that there is a plan for how we're going to be able to take this forward. And so I just close for now with saying that I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. I'm going to float around a bit across the tables just to kind of be able to hear how things are going. Feel free to raise or ask any questions to me or to anyone on the council. And I'm looking forward to hearing what you say about how we can leverage the power of this network. Thank you.